Hi, and welcome to History's a Blast. A statue of a Native American woman with a palisade behind it. Could we be on the Lewis and Clark Trail? Nope, not hardly. That's Pocahontas, and behind her is the reconstructed palisade of James Fort. We're at old Jamestown, Virginia, and let's see what we can get into. The site of the fort and the original settlement, or Old Town, are actually the property of a private nonprofit called Preservation Virginia, which was established in 1889. And in 1994, archaeology began, and in 2015, Preservation Virginia established the Jamestown Rediscovery Foundation to continue archaeology and other activities such as interpretations through living history and tours and so on the Old Town and original fortification site. So you still got to pay $15 per adult because the Park Service doesn't control this property, even though it's within the National Park purview. It's kind of weird. Anyway, it's worth it, we think, because the stuff that's going on here, the archaeology especially, and the interpretations of what it was like back then, 315 years ago now, is worth supporting. So we didn't mind the $15, and that's not exorbitant, we don't think. The statue was erected in 1922, and it's by William Ordway Partridge. It says she was born about 1595, about 15 miles from here, and she married John Rolfe in 1614. She saved the life of John Smith, Captain John Smith. She died in England in 1617. As we walk through the grounds here from the statue of Pocahontas, we see the back of Captain John Smith staring out onto the James River. Now, John Smith was an adventurer, and like most adventurers in those days, he was a soldier of fortune from time to time. And it says here that he fought as a soldier in the Netherlands and in Hungary, where he was captured by the Muslims and taken to Turkey and sold into slavery in Russia, where he murdered his master, escaped, and journeyed back to Hungary to collect a promised reward of money and a coat of arms, and returned to England in time. So there you go. The first governor of Virginia had been a slave. Very interesting take on the complexity of slavery in the 16th and into the 17th century. And we enter the reconstruction of the stockade. This is one of the workshops. You see archaeological dig there in the foreground, reconstructions of some of the structures, at least the lower walls. And this is the memorial chapel that was erected in 1907, the 300th anniversary. And it stands on the remains of several earlier churches that were here. Tombstones were rare in the 17th and 18th century, the storyboard says, but nevertheless, here they are. The storyboard that Mrs. History's a Blast was reading before she ducked out of the picture says that this is the fourth church to be on this site, erected between 1893 and 1907. And it's behind the brick bell tower, which is the only surviving 17th century structure, which was constructed between the 1660s and 1680s. There it is. Here, the common law of England was established on this continent with the arrival of the first settlers on May 13th, 1607. This is the cellar kitchen excavation. And after the 1609 to 1610 starving winter, the cellar was abandoned and became a trash pit. And when they excavated it, they found bones of animals, but they also found the bones of a 14-year-old English girl. And markings on the bones gave conclusive proof that there was cannibalism during the starving winter. Yikes, grisly stuff. And you can see here on the reverse side of the palisade, wooden pegs driven through the side braces and into the posts, which are basically split logs that are anchored in the ground. Here's an old artillery piece and one of the round corner palisades, guarding against dangerous pirates and catamarans. This reconstruction is called the barracks, and it's built in what's known as the mud and stud architectural style, which is characteristic of Lincolnshire, England, where many of the first settlers came from. So they didn't build log cabins. That came later, when different ethnic groups who built in that sort of tradition started to arrive in the 18th century. But these first settlers built the way they knew, because they brought carpenters and other craftsmen with them. So you can see this was poles in the ground. That's how they identified the location of the building. The early archaeology that they did here found the post holes and built the basement, which was filled with trash. It became a trash pit, and all kinds of artifacts came out of there, including helmets and all other discarded implements, broken things. But you can see this is the skeleton of a building, characteristic of some of the old village buildings in merry old England. A combination of mud and straw would go between the studs to fill in the gaps, and then would be whitewashed for appearance's sake, probably, and also for protection from weather, I guess. There it is. Mud and stud architecture. And there's a picture of the Queen, the late Queen, Elizabeth II, who visited here in 2007. The noise in the background, there's a large group of school children here who are romping by the water, having a good time, learning probably absolutely nothing, but oh well. It gets them out in the air, and maybe one or two of them will take an interest in early American history. One can hope. This cross memorializes the English settlers who died during the first terrible winter after the arrival in 1607. Their bodies are along the ridge in the immediate background there. This marks the first British burial site in North America. And we're here at the Archaeological Museum across the field from where the fort stood, where we also had a wonderful conversation with that team of archaeologists in those two tents over there. Really interesting. This is the Archaearium. It's a building that sits above the remains of the first Virginia State House. And these concrete foundations are built where the archaeology says the originals were. And the building itself sits on piles that raise it above the site. There's a number of burial vaults in there, burial pits I should say, as well as the remains of the basement of the original State House, right across the field from the fort, or where the fort probably had already been torn down. An archaeologist over there told me that the fort was gone by the 1620s. This is a neat exhibit. It's a cutaway of the well. It shows the items that they found in excavating the well after it was abandoned. Used as a trash dump. Rest plate. Amazing. Another fort was built here in 1861 by the Confederates named Fort Pocahontas. And guns here were used to test iron targets out on the river. And that information and data was used in the construction of the CSS Virginia, which we visited yesterday, along with the Monitor. Captain John Smith, Governor of Virginia in 1608. And the settlement he founded. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll take time to look at a few of our other ones. See you soon.